Hey, what's up guys? Joker here. Hope you're all doing well. Today we're going to be doing a PC port report for Dying Light 2, which has been available for about a week now. And yeah, we're going to get into it and talk about the graphics options that are available, testing with DLSS, FSR, some comparisons there. You know, whether or not using ray tracing in this game is viable, as this is hands down probably the most ray trace title that we've seen to date, offering things like DirectX 12 Ultimate to lend it to ray tracing so that it can do more effects that we weren't able to do previously. So we're going to be getting into all of that in just a moment. But first, I do want to jump into the options menu and kind of go over what we got in there as far as video options are concerned. You can see that we do have a windowed borderless or full screen. All my testing was done in full screen. I had tabbed out a moment ago, so that's why it was on borderless full screen, but 4K maxed out in this game, but using DLSS on the quality setting for most of that. We'll talk about that more in just a minute, and looking at native DLSS and as well as FSR. But I did find that running DLSS in quality ended up being the best end result as far as getting the best quality performance as well as a good image in the game. And again, we'll talk about that all in just a moment. And we do have some advanced options in here we can go ahead and take a look at if you want to be able to toggle things. For the APIs, we've got DirectX 11, DirectX 12, as well as DirectX 12 Ultimate, so you could take advantage of all of those ray tracing features. But when I was not using ray tracing, I was running in just vanilla DirectX 12, which ran fine for me on the NVIDIA RTX 3080 Ti, running with async compute. I've also got sharpness slider in here. You can set your FOV, which I do wish was an actual like amount, like 90 degrees or whatever. But I found that on 4 seemed to be pretty good for me. Anti-aliasing quality, we've got that maxed out. Motion blur can thankfully be completely disabled. And everything that you're seeing in here is at the highest setting that it can go, besides introducing ray tracing, which is available for quite a few of the options. We've got sun shadow quality, which can be ray traced. We've also got contact shadow quality, that does not have it. Ambient occlusion and global illumination both do offer ultra quality ray tracing options, which you can turn on. There's also reflections as well as a ray traced flashlight, and we've also got fog quality in here, which you can adjust. So those are all the graphics options that are available in the game. You also got full key binding, remappings and all that stuff. I'm not going to change any of my settings here. So you can customize all the key bindings in here if you want to be able to do so. So very nice that that's in there. Obviously, most PC games should have that by now. Kind of a shame if they don't. And I did find that I found that it played perfectly fine on mouse and keyboard. No issues there. I didn't feel like I needed a controller, even though there's a lot of traversing and things along that. Being a first-person game, I would opt to use a mouse and keyboard personally, but you know, you do whatever works for you. And there's not a ton of accessibility options. As you can see at the top, there's not even an accessibility menu, but there are a few things in here you can adjust, like subtitles, the size, and thankfully you can turn the QuickTime events from having to rapidly tap buttons into a hold mode, which I always opt to do nowadays. You used to have these options in games years ago, and you'd be sitting there playing these stupid QuickTime events. But I'm glad to see that there is a hold mode, at least in this, but there are not a ton of other accessibility options, sadly. But I know those are important to some people, so I just did want to quickly mention it. Right, so with that out of the way, we're going to do a brief ad break, and then we will jump in and take a look at the performance and discuss ray tracing, DLSS, FSR, all of that good stuff. But first, today's video is brought to you by SuperCDK.com, where you can save money on games for all of your favorite platforms, as well as software like Windows 10 Pro for just $19.50, and then you can unlock the prestigious dark mode on Windows 10 and take advantage of that. I couldn't live without it. And if you shoot over there right now, you could save 25% off. Hit the buy now button and then put in my code JP25 at checkout. I'll walk you guys through the process right now so you can see how much money we're saving and how to go ahead and install this on your Windows 10 PC. That brings our price down to $14.62, total of savings of almost $5 using that JP25 code, which will work for any software products over there. Once you're done with that, go ahead and click on Submit Order and select your payment mode of choice, which for me personally is PayPal, and then I'll go ahead and complete the checkout by clicking on Pay Now. After completing the checkout, it'll bring you to your purchased order page, and it will update in a matter of seconds, or just go ahead and hit F5. Go ahead and do that one time. It came through literally immediately. I got the payment email that it had gone through and the delivery of the product exactly at the same time. Once you're done with that, go ahead and click on View Keys and Codes, and we'll get our code right here that we can go ahead and copy and paste in on Windows 10 by hitting the Start button and type in the word Activate. When you see that activation settings or see if Windows is activated, go ahead and click on that, and it'll bring up this right here, and click on Change Your Product Key or Unlock Windows 10. As I already have Windows 10, I obviously don't need to put in a new key, but just paste it in and then go ahead and click Next, and you are all done and set. For more information on SuperCDK.com as well as the coupon code, be sure to check out the links down in the description below. So jumping in and taking a look at the performance in Dying Light 2, this is early on in the game here with all the ray tracing stuff turned on and running on DLSS quality. If you're going to try to use all the ray tracing stuff in this game, you're definitely going to want to run some type of upscaling solution. And even then, it's still going to be very taxing, and you're going to see frame drops come down below 60 quite often. And getting rid of ray tracing will pretty much double your frame rate pretty much immediately. So it's going to be up to you whether or not, you want to, play with those niceties. I'm honestly opting to not use ray tracing for my full playthrough, and the majority of the gameplay you'll be seeing in this video will not be ray traced. And you'll be able to tell that because the frame rate is going to be on the much higher side than what you are seeing right now. But I do think it needs to be commended, the ray tracing that they put in this game, because it looks absolutely gorgeous. The global illumination and the ambient occlusion and the lighting and everything are better than anything I've seen in a game before this, since like basically Metro Exodus was the last title that I was really impressed with the ray tracing effects, because it wasn't just like one thing, like, oh, we just, ray trace the shadows or the reflections. It's sort of like everything all combined to give you a feel of what these things are going to be like in the future. And, the ray tracing having it in this game is really cool that we can kind of take a look at that stuff and check it out. But at the end of the day, it really is future technology still, but still, it's come a long way, since the 20 series came out, and that was, struggling a lot. Knowing how demanding ray tracing is, even being able to run it above 30 frames per second, let alone even approaching 60 in some parts of this game, with the amount of ray tracing that is turned on and using an upscaler still, the fact that it can even run as well as it is mind-blowing, that in just with two generations of ray tracing cards, it's already come this far, and it just excites me for, whenever we see the 40 series come out and we get to see, titles like this start to really shine, where playing them at 4K at a locked 60 actually becomes viable using upscaling, and then maybe two more generations down the road from that, we're playing at 4K native with even more ray tracing effects than we're seeing right here in Dying Light 2. So it looks absolutely gorgeous. It is brutally taxing to run, but if you have an RTX card, it's worth whacking on just to take some screenshots, or at least just to see, kind of where things are going with ray tracing. Now, with ray tracing off, the game does run pretty well, although there are some instances where you will see frames drop down below 60 if you're running everything maxed out. Tweaking some options like shadows and fog can definitely help boost the performance in the game a fair amount, and should get you over 60 frames per second if you're running at 4K on a 3080 Ti, which obviously not everyone is, but we're more so just talking about overall performance in general. If you're having performance issues, those are things you should look to adjust, as well as introducing things like DLSS and FSR, which I've opted to use DLSS Quality for my playthrough, and I'm going to show you a quick comparison here in the iCat tool so we can get a look at the game in native on the left here. We've also got DLSS in the center on quality, and then we've got FSR quality on the right. And right off the bat, the first thing before we're going to zoom in and stuff, you can see the frame rates up here. So native, it was getting about 67 FPS in this one particular spot, and there was sometimes in this area where it would come down below 60, so it's not always going to be above 60 at native. DLSS was about 97 FPS, and FSR quality was 111 FPS. So FSR was getting the higher frame rate here in this particular area. However, that is not the full picture, pun intended, because if we zoom in here, and I hope that YouTube compression doesn't do too bad of a job of sort of showing this comparison here, because some of the differences are quite subtle. But if I had this on my phone and I was able to zoom in even further than what iCat will allow, because this is the furthest that iCat will let me actually zoom in, I believe. Yeah, that's the furthest I can get in on this. So as you can see around this fencing here, we've got the native on the left and then DLSS here, which between the two, I would actually say that DLSS looks a little bit sharper around the edges, and really the worst of the three was FSR for sure. Now, it was getting better performance, and you'd have to decide for yourself on whether or not it's worth it, because I feel like the FSR solution adds a lot of blur on the edges of a lot of these things, and when I put it on in-game, I find that to be extremely distracting, especially when you're talking about motion vectors, things moving, when you're actually moving around, you're not looking at a still image like this. The blurriness and the shimmering effect on some of these fine edges and details like leaves and blades of grass become extremely pronounced and distracting to me, honestly. And since I can take advantage of the DLSS, having the 3080 Ti, that is what I've opted to do here, as I do think it even has a slight edge over playing the game at native at 4K. It's gotten to that point now with DLSS that it has pretty much surpassed native resolution, as even some parts of it where it might have looked, blurry in general just because of maybe distance or whatever like that, the AI upscaling is doing a better job than even the native resolution can at sort of, smoothing out some of these edges with just traditional forms of anti-aliasing. So that's why I've opted to use DLSS on the quality setting here to play the game 4K maxed out, no ray tracing, just to get the smoothest frames possible. And there was, a lot of areas where I was over 100 frames per second, but pretty much over like 80, 90, most of the time hovering right around that 100 FPS mark was generally where I saw the game running at 4K and the 3080 Ti and everything, and the game was super smooth. There's a couple of hitches here or there, like during cutscenes and stuff, or like when you're going down like a zip line, but you can kind of, ascertain from during those sequences that it's more likely just loading in assets for the next area, so that's why there's some minor hitches here or there, but actually playing the game and running around and in combat, everything felt super smooth to me. I mean, I maybe saw a hitch once or twice, during fast combat sequences, but for the most part, very, very smooth overall, and didn't have really any issues or complaints about how Dying Light 2 is running here on my rig. And so far it's got extremely good reviews out there. I think the port quality is solid, and it is definitely worth picking up. And if you're on any modern hardware, obviously it's going to depend on the resolution and all that stuff, but any 20 series, 30 series cards, or 6000 series from AMD, if you're able to get your hands on any of these nearly impossible to find GPUs, you should be able to play the game any fairly respectable settings and resolution depending on what you play it. Obviously, you're not going to be playing this on a 2060 at 4K, but if you have a 2060, you're probably not running a 4K display. You're probably more likely on a 1080p or 1440p high refresh rate monitor, and in those cases, you should be fine, especially taking advantage of things like DLSS to get a little bit of a boost in performance. VRAM requirements on the game, I did notice that it was actually allocating quite a bit, up to 10 gigabytes of VRAM actually being allocated at any given time, but it was actually using more so around like 4,000 to 5,000 megabytes most of the time when I was playing on Dying Light 2. So it seems like if you do have a little bit lower VRAM, like if you're running on an 8 gigabyte card, you're probably going to be absolutely fine. It's just not going to be able to allocate as much as it would. So maybe some streaming textures and stuff might be a little bit slower to load in, but honestly, it really wasn't using that much VRAM, even though it was allocating quite a bit. But I've got a 12 gigabyte card, so if it's got the extra headroom to allocate it, then it's going to go ahead and do so to try to smooth out the gameplay and make it run better overall. So really, I've got no complaints about the performance in Dying Light 2 at the end of the day. The ray tracing stuff, beautiful, absolutely brutal to run, and there was a lot of, negative comments and stuff that I saw about that. It's like, oh my god, it can't even do 60 frames. Like, people have to step back and realize how new ray tracing to coming to PC games is, and how far it's already come, and that the fact is that this is still like future technology at this level. Like, the amount of ray tracing they have chucked into this game is insane. It's like what they did with with Quake 2 and all of that. It's almost on that level. But then you're talking about modern graphics here versus Quake 2 with ray tracing, which is like a 20-plus-year-old game, or whacking it onto Fortnite or Minecraft. This stuff has come a long way already, and I'm looking forward to the Hopper GPUs and stuff whenever those are going to come out, which are obviously rumored. And I'm hoping one of those can actually max this game out at 4K with ray tracing and DLSS. That's kind of what I'm keeping my eye on, because we're definitely with the current gen of consoles now. It's only a matter of time before we start seeing more and more ray trace titles out there. I believe Ghostwire Tokyo is going to have ray tracing, and that's coming to PC as well, which I didn't even know that was coming to PC. I thought that was a PlayStation exclusive, but we're getting that on PC in March, so that's going to be really awesome too, and I'm pretty sure that has ray tracing. I know it's not coming to PC, but the new Gran Turismo title looks gorgeous, and like I said, as developers have access to this hardware because of the current gen consoles, we're going to see more of it trickling over to the PC and probably looking even better and having higher detail ray tracing than what the consoles will be able to do. Obviously, with higher end hardware, we'll be able to get even more ray tracing than what the consoles can push. So, yeah, Dying Light 2, definitely check it out. And if you've got a ray tracing capable card, at least whack those options on and take a look at how they look, because they are incredible. I'm going to go ahead and get out of here, though, guys. I hope you guys all have a fantastic day and have enjoyed this coverage of Dying Light 2, and I'll catch you next time for another video. Tara.